So, why does your IELTS reading scores suck? Well, that might be assuming. I mean, if your scores are actually above 30, over 40 in the IELTS reading practices you're doing, then you really don't need to listen to this video so much. This is more for the students who are struggling with scores like 18 out of 40, 20 out of 40. If you're in that range where your scores are abysmal, they're at around 5.0 band score, then the answer is pretty simple, and that is pretty much because of poor vocabulary. Now, there are many other underlying problems besides just having poor vocabulary, but essentially that's one of the things. I think the next thing that hinders anyone from improving in reading is the bigger problem, it's the bigger challenge. Because if you have poor vocabulary and you're the type who puts in the time and effort to improve that problem, then your scores should naturally be improving with each reading test you take. But if constantly you're getting scores like 18 out of 40, 16 out of 40, and instead of going up, your reading scores actually go down, then your problem isn't just poor vocabulary, it's also probably because of the mindset you have with regards to the reading test. And this mindset is very common among all the students I handle, even the seasoned and veteran ones. That common mindset is that you just want the answer, and I want to get the answer without having to understand the text. So remember that mindset. That's the mindset 99.9% of my students have. They see these really long passages and they think to themselves, I'm too lazy to read everything. It's a hassle. So I don't want to read everything. I just want to look at the question and skim and scan for the answer and miraculously come up with the correct answer without having to invest time and effort into understanding what the passage is really saying. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Poor vocabulary is one thing, but the mindset where you don't want to spend time to understand what you're reading is an even bigger problem, in my opinion. Now, skimming and scanning can work, don't get me wrong, but it only works if you actually understand the words you're skimming and scanning for, or if you know the synonyms to them, because chances are everything will be paraphrased. You can't expect that the question keyword will be mentioned word for word in the IELTS reading test. There's no way they're going to do that. Even in the listening test, tendency is they will paraphrase, change the wording, or use very deep words and synonyms so that it's not as easy for you to just skim and scan for the answer. Now, one thing is when students encounter a synonym or deep wording or phrasing, they don't really bother to look up the meaning of that word. There's this assumption that, okay, I didn't understand this word, so I'm just going to skip it completely, assume or imagine what I think that word means, and then I'll probably get the answer either way. That again is the wrong mindset, because chances are even the slightest misunderstanding of a word will lead to you answering the wrong choice or giving the wrong answer. I've had students who thought that the meaning of the word reluctant was that they did not do something. For example, if the reading passage says glass companies were reluctant to sell to the people, then the way they interpret that sentence is that glass companies did not sell to the people. When in fact, what reluctant really means is that they were hesitant. They still did it in the end. It's like me saying, I was reluctant to teach you. Doesn't mean I didn't teach you. It just means I was hesitating. I was having second thoughts. But there will be that choice there. The sentence will say glass companies were reluctant to sell to people, and then you have the choice A, glass companies sold to people, or B, glass companies did not sell to people. And students will again answer B because they have this misunderstanding of the word reluctant. Now, that's just one example. I could give several more others, but I don't want to spend the full 10 minutes just giving out difficult words and misconceptions about them. But yeah, in short, the problem is really simple, but the mindset is an even bigger problem. So again, the problem is poor vocabulary. We don't bother to understand the words. We skim and scan. We just look for the exact same phrasing. And what's worse is when we don't understand the word, we don't bother to look it up. We don't bother to study it or Google the definition or use a thesaurus to find out other synonyms. And the solution most students tend to go for is to look for some sort of magic technique or reading strategy or some sort of speed reading method that will supposedly give them the correct answer without having to understand the passage or the difficult words. For all those who are listening and doing that, please stop it. Stop assuming that there is some magic technique or strategy that will get you the correct answer without having to understand those very difficult words. There is no such thing. The simple solution is really to go out there and expand your vocabulary. Whenever there's a word you don't understand, please Google the definition. Now, if Googling the meaning of the word hasn't cleared the meaning of the word for you, then using a thesaurus, even Googling the image might help. Then students will come tell me that, but sir, in the actual exam, I'm not allowed to do that. In the actual exam, I can't Google and search for the meaning of the word. And my answer to that is, yes, in the actual exam, you can't Google the meaning of words. But how else will you develop your vocabulary? How else do you plan to improve your knowledge of words? Are you just going to keep reading and getting an 18 out of 40 and then reading again and getting a 16 out of 40 and then reading again without bothering to improve your knowledge of words? It's, by Albert Einstein's definition, that's absurdity. That's doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result is ridiculous. It's absurd. You have to change something. When you study, the goal isn't to simulate what score you would get in the actual exam. When you study, the goal is to improve your existing skills, such as your knowledge about the topic, whether it's vocabulary, pronunciation, or grammar. The goal of studying is to work on those skills. And the tools are available. Google is one of the greatest inventions, in my opinion, because all you have to do is just type definition of blank word and then press enter and you'll see the definition right away. But how many do this while they're reading? I'd say none. It sounds assuming, but so far when a student sees a word they don't understand in the reading passage, they just skip it. They'll guess and then assume, and then they'll get that low score. And then they'll think, what did I do wrong? Remember guys, at the end of the day, reading is a comprehension test. I don't care what technique, strategy, or method you've been taught or learned. If you do not, or if you cannot understand the words, not just in the passage, but if you can't understand the words in the questions, there is no hope your strategy or technique will work because it's a comprehension test. All the other techniques and strategies are really aimed more at making you more efficient with your time, I suppose. But at the heart of it, at the core of it, you can be fast. You could answer the test. You could go all C and all multiple choice and get a low score. Or you could take the time to understand what you're reading. Look up the meaning of words. Expand your vocabulary so that little by little, it won't happen overnight, but little by little, you'll see improvements in your scores because your knowledge of words is growing and expanding. So in short, I hope you will stop assuming that you don't need to learn new words. Google it, find out the meaning, the mindset should be to understand, not just to skim and scan.